We ask the questions. What is needed in the world?
In Egypt today, there are few artists who occupy the crosshairs of politics and art, as does Alaa Al-Aswany. His best-selling novel, The Yacubian Building, stripped bare the exasperation, frustration and desires of Egyptian society. Originally published in 2002 and made into a movie, the book portrayed the anguish and hopelessness felt by a cross-section of Egyptians living in a Cairo apartment block. Their discontent later echoed in the real-life uprising against Hosni Mubarak. The central character in the movie was played by Adel Imam, one of the Middle East's most prominent actors, who was recently prosecuted and sentenced to a 3-month prison term for, according to the charge sheet, offending Islam. The sentence is on appeal, but the case raised questions about the position of art in a shifting political and social landscape. While continuing to insist he is no politician, Alaa Al-Aswany recently came out in support of a new political party launched by Mohammed el Baradei, intended to present a viable and secular alternative to the parties of the Muslim Brotherhood and the ultra-conservative Salafi movement that dominate Egypt's new parliament. Alaa Al-Aswany now talks to Al Jazeera.
Dr. Al-Aswany, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
You once said that Egypt was prevented from fulfilling its destiny because of dictatorship. Can it fulfill its destiny now?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the dictatorship for Egypt was a kind of paralysis. I mean, Egypt, I described Egypt many times before as somebody who was very strong, but paralyzed. And the paralysis was dictatorship. We had the revolution. We overcame the barrier of fear. We succeeded to overthrow Mr. Mubarak, but we still have problems because the transition period was not the best we could have. We have troubles, but still I'm quite sure Egypt is on the right track, and I'm quite sure that we're going to have democracy, and soon.
What sort of role do you think that the army has played? You were very supportive of the army from the beginning. You have been very critical of the Supreme Council of Armed Forces in recent months, the umbrella body of the military which holds executive power. What sort of role are they playing? Are they helping?
I'm still supporting the army, but now I could see the difference between the SCAF and the army. And I think that was the misunderstanding from the very beginning. The army is belonging, has been belonging for 2 centuries to the Egyptian people. We don't see the army as another army or independent organization. We see the army as our army. So I'm still supporting our army, but the SCAF has been playing a political role. And this political role is very linked to the nature of the SCAF. These people are the generals who were appointed by Mubarak himself. So I don't expect them to have any different vision for Egypt or for the world. I don't believe that they believe in the revolution. And I think that from the very beginning there was what we call a misunderstanding, malentendu, like the very famous play of Albert Camus. The revolution thought that the resignation of Mubarak is the first step for the elimination of the regime, and the SCAF accepted or was obliged to accept the resignation of Mubarak as an essential step to preserve Mubarak regime. So there was a misunderstanding from the very beginning, and we could even see all what happened during these 15 months as a conflict between the will of the revolution to change, to make a real change, and the resistance of the SCAF to keep everything as it was under Mubarak.
There does seem to be as well a creeping conservatism within this post-revolutionary Egyptian society. I mean, specifically we have, for example, a comedian, a popular comedian in films, being convicted of insulting Islam,
Yes.
Adel Imam.
Yeah.
In one of your books, you were very, very critical of a particular figure. I'm thinking of Yaqubian Building, where you have a pious Muslim who is utterly venal and utterly corrupt. Do you think that you could now be accused of insulting Islam because
Absolutely.
of that kind
Absolutely.
of position?
I think there is a list, and I think I am number 2 or number 3 on the list. But this is how the fanatics think. I mean, there is a real contradiction between fanatism and art. If you understand art, you will never be a fanatic. And if you are a fanatic, keep yourself away from art because you will never understand. But here, the issue is more complicated because the SCAF had tendency during the elections to form a parliament of a majority of Islamists. In my opinion, the elections were not rigged in the straightforward way, or were not rigged directly like Mubarak used to do. But, for example, the woman played a major role in this revolution. Half of the protesters were women all the time. You have in almost more than 500 members of the parliament, we have 7 women. So I don't think that these elections were fair. And the SCAF controlled the regulations to have, in the end, the result or the kind of parliament they want. Accordingly, you have all these troubles because these people, especially the Salafi people, they are really far behind as far as art may be concerned, you see. So they need really a kind of rehabilitation to get again to the 21st century.
But there again, you have a lawyer from the ultra-conservative Salafi movement going to court. That may well be his right to take some kind of legal action should he be offended. But then you have the court upholding the plea. There's a difference there between an opinion and something that becomes legal process. That is dangerous, is it not?
Well, I'm sorry to say that the legal process it's in Egypt is between brackets, because we have independent judges, many, not all, and we saw that. I think the whole world saw that very, very clearly during the crisis about the American detainees, the American people who were brought to court for this story of
the non-governmental
NGOs.
organizations.
You see,
yeah.
Mrs. Clinton said on TV that the problem was settled. And by that time, there was no any legal cover for the statement of Mrs. Clinton. And there was a plane, an American plane, which came and determined to take the Americans. And then one judge made a special court afternoon to let them free. you see. And so this is just an example that the system is not independent. So if you are suspicious about any case in Egypt, you're not wrong.
But in this conservatism, though, as well, it may have been something that has been through a period. It's not just post-revolution. You wrote a number of times about the influence of a Saudi form of Islamism within Egypt, the impact of the Wahhabi thought. Is this something that's now becoming embedded in Egypt, this outside influence that is weaving its way into the fabric of the country?
Absolutely. We have had our Egyptian interpretation of Islam, and we presented, and this Egyptian interpretation of Islam is very tolerant and very much for democracy, very much for the women's rights and the human rights. And it was founded for the first time in the year 1899 by a great thinker in Egypt called Mohammed Abdu. And that's why Egypt, because of this tolerant interpretation, despite the British occupation, Egypt has been a leading country in art, in politics, in everything. Beginning from the late 70s, beginning from the 80s, we had for the first time another interpretation of the same religion, the Wahhabism. And this Wahhabism is the contrary of our interpretation. It is against democracy, against art, against women's rights, against human rights. The problem here is that because of the oil, first, these people are sponsored by millions of dollars. And if we think about the structure of the Saudi regime, which is a kind of alliance between the Wahhabi sheikh and the royal family. So it is for their political interest to spend the oil money to spread the Wahhabism everywhere, because every time the Wahhabism is spread, they are going to have a kind of political support. And I must say here between brackets that most of the mosques in the West are sponsored by Wahhabi people and Wahhabi money, and that's why we could understand why this problem of the burqa in France, for example. You see, the burqa, for example, in our interpretation, 1899, Mohammed Abdu said that the burqa has nothing to do with Islam, and we knew that very, very early. So I wrote before that we have two parallel struggles in Egypt. The struggle for democracy, which is much more visible, and another struggle which is less visible but not less important. It is a struggle between a conflict between the Egyptian tolerance and the Wahhabism. And both struggles are very linked. I mean, if we could overcome one barrier, we're going to overcome the other one automatically. And I believe that's exactly what is happening now in Egypt. We overcame the barrier of fear, and we obliged Mubarak to step down. Accordingly, despite the support of the Saudis, the money and the support of the SCAF, I believe that the fanatics are losing in Egypt. Are losing, they are not gaining, they are losing, because now people every day see that religion is something, and to practice politics through religion is something very different.
You wrote once, actually, that in politics you can argue or defend points of view. In religion, defense of your faith becomes fanaticism.
Yes, of course. You become very, I'm not saying that, because the term Islamism is a very wide term, you see, because I'm talking about the political Islam. I prefer this term because I believe that any Muslim should be Islamic person in a way. I mean, you are Muslim, so you must follow, because you believe, you must follow the instructions of your religion. This is something. But the political Islam is very different. The political Islam is The Wahhabism is that using the Islam as a political agenda to get to power. This is a very particular way to understand the religion. You have many people, millions of Egyptians and Muslims all over the world, who believe that the Islam is a great religion like all other great religions, but you cannot use the religion as a political system or a political way to go to power. This is something very different. So I believe that when you are in the political Islam, you are very, very close to be fascist. You are very close to fascism. In a way, you cannot, it is very hard for you, if you follow the political Islam ideas, to understand that other people could be right as well. Because you believe that you have the truth in your hand, and you believe that you are representing God, and other people are against the religion of God. Accordingly, it is very hard for you, if you think this way, it is very hard for you to admit that other people could have equal rights, you see, to the rights you have, because you are on the side of God and they are on the other side. So this is a danger of the political Islam. But I'm not generalizing. I say you are very close to be to fascism. But this does not mean that all the followers of political Islam are fascists.
But you do have a situation at present where, as you said, you've got close to 50% of those in parliament are Muslim Brotherhood. Their motto, Islam is a solution. Another 20%, the ultra-conservative Salafi movement, very close practitioners of Wahhabism. But why? Why did the Egyptian people vote for that more conservative strand at the time of revolution? Why do you believe?
I don't believe. I think that this people have had much more than their real percentage in the Egyptian society. As I said, I don't believe the elections were, probably the elections were not rigged, but I'm quite sure that these elections were not fair. All kinds of violations were done during these elections. These people, especially the Salafi people, we don't know their finances, we don't know how they do get their money. The SCAF doesn't supervise at all their budgets. They were spending millions of Egyptian pounds. They were buying votes. They were distributing food for free in the very poor areas. And this happened, and it is recorded on videos, and it was before the eyes of the SCAF, but the SCAF didn't want to bother them. So I cannot say they were pushed to have the majority. I don't believe this is a real majority. First. Second, the Americans who were accused of all this stuff, what was their accusations? They were accused of forming in NGO or an organization without permission and receiving foreign money out of the state control. That was the two accusations. Interestingly, these two accusations could fit to the case of the Muslim Brothers. The Muslim Brothers, up till now, as an organization, is working without permission. And the party is a product of the association Muslim Brothers, which is working up till now without permission. And these people, together with the Salafi people, they are receiving foreign money out of the state control. So just to give an example how the situation, the policy of the SCAF is not consistent.
What does all this mean, though, for art in Egypt? You wrote 2 novels, a number of stories, at a time when Egypt was under dictatorship. Your art was almost provoked, enticed, pushed by that pressure. What now? What now for the future of art, for the future of literature, for the future of painting, of all those expressions of human abilities? What now in Egypt?
Well, I think it's an exam which has been postponed for decades, and we must make the exam. You see, we must pass the exam, because postponing your exam is not a good idea, especially if it's really very essential to make this exam. You see, so Egypt had to face Wahhabism face to face. And that was postponed for 3 decades by Mubarak, because Mubarak was using the fear of everybody from the Wahhabism. The fear of the West, the fear of Israel, the fear of intellectuals, the fear of Egyptian Christians, the Copts. So the Mubarak regime was using this fear to justify the dictatorship. What happened is the Wahhabism, in the same time, Mubarak was opening the door to Wahhabi people, you see, because they were very essential to him. So we have to face Wahhabism, and it's about time after the revolution to pass the exam. Fine, I will keep writing my novels the way I used to, and I have millions of readers who are going to defend me, like the comedian. This comedian who was sentenced today is the most important comedian in the whole, in 22 Arab countries. So we're going to defend him, and we're going really to struggle to keep our culture, because this is the Egyptian culture. It is, you see.
Is art a weapon in this?
Absolutely, absolutely, because that's why they don't like, the fanatics really hate art, because art is like the daily life, but it is not the daily life. And they are not prepared to see the difference between fiction and reality. Because if somebody is fanatic, he is very weak in imagination. And because he is, I mean, a fanatic is using a kind of the religion as a kind of cookbook. I mean, he never thinks. He opened page 14 to see if this is right or wrong, and then he follows. So if you ask him to try really to imagine and to know that what he's going to see on the screen or to read in the book, it seems real, but it's not real. This is too much for him to understand.
In your book, in the Yakubian building, it's a building filled with people from all sectors of Egypt. It is a people bent by corruption, by love, by anger, by hidden desires. How much a reflection, was the book written a decade ago, of the Egypt that we are looking at now?
Well, I believe in fiction you have 2 elements. You have the local element, or what we call in art the now element, in which the novelist is discussing a very important issues, social issues and political issues. But this now element is not the most important element in fiction. The most important element in fiction is the human element, is to be able to express, to feel as a novelist, and to express the human feelings. So you use the social reality to make a kind of human fiction. So that's exactly what I tried to do in all my books. So I believe that if you read the Yakubian building now, I think that you're going to understand many things in Egypt, because the society in Egypt is not as simple as it seems. You see, Egypt is very stratified. This country has been existing now for 7,000 years. We have been Arabs and Muslims only for 1,400 years. but we were Egyptians for 35,000 for 3,500 years. So in the end, you have a very stratified society. I think that the Jacobean building will help the readers to understand. But I hope that the reader of all my novels will feel the human element in the novel, because the most important thing in the fiction is the human being and not the issue. In fiction, the human being is the issue.
Alaa Al-Aswany, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you.
Thank you.